Welcome everyone. This is the account with the report for day 441 of the war in Ukraine. Thank you for joining me. Today I have one article I want to point out. There are no extra news segments, however there have been a lot of minor updates today. All updates are grouped into the usual situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and international developments. Before we start the news though, the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. As more details emerge about the successful counterattack, blame is being pushed around, but most Russian mill bloggers agree that poor defense coordination between the Russian 72nd Brigade and the Wagner PMC led to conditions which the Ukrainian managed to exploit. Ukrainian sources claim 3 times 2.6 kilometers strip of land south of Bakhmut was liberated, and 2 companies of the Russian 72nd Brigade and a Wagner assault unit were destroyed. Inside Bakhmut, the situation has barely changed. And now for the article I wanted to highlight, titled How Russia Has Attempted to Erase Ukrainian Language, Culture Throughout Centuries. This is episode 3 of Ukraine's True History, a video and story series by the Kyiv Independent. The series is funded by the Institute for War and Peace Reporting within the program Ukraine Forward, Amplifying Analysis. The program is financed by the Matra program of the Embassy of the Netherlands in Ukraine. If you are interested in history, consider checking out this series. A look at all the minor updates out of Ukraine. Russia continues to launch Shahed drones at Ukraine. Last night, Russian forces attacked Dnipropetrovsk Oblast using Shahed drones, with Ukrainian air defense forces shooting down 3 of them. According to Energoatom, the Russian occupiers plan to deport to Russia about 3,000 workers servicing the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant from the town of Enerhodar. The Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba warned allies not to consider the upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive the last one of the war. Ukraine might need to prepare for further ones. Lieutenant General Serhiy Nayev, the commander of the Ukrainian Joint Forces, has personally delivered SUVs to the armed forces of Ukraine for the creation of mobile air defense units. Today, journalists were able to see the remains of the Kinzhal missile shot down over Kyiv. Andriy Niebitov, head of the main police department in Kyiv Oblast, said in an interview that the national police database called War Criminal already contains information about more than 200,000 Russians who committed crimes in Ukraine. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. Russia has begun preparing new waves of relocating Ukrainian civilians from Russian-occupied areas of Zaporizhzhia Oblast under the pretext of evacuations. According to Vadim Boychenko, the mayor of Mariupol, since the beginning of the invasion, Russia has damaged 2,208 houses in Mariupol. The Russian authorities have so far destroyed over 1,100 houses and plan to demolish another 700. Journalists of the Krim Reali project by Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, have posted an interactive map of the Crimean Peninsula annexed by Russia in 2014, with 223 active, temporary and conserved military facilities of the Russian Federation with geolocations. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Russian President Vladimir Putin has appointed Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov as his official representative during the consideration in Parliament of Russia's denunciation of the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe. The Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe was negotiated and concluded during the last years of the Cold War and established comprehensive limits on key categories of conventional military equipment in Europe, from the Atlantic to the Urals, and mandated the destruction of excess weaponry. The Kremlin already put a halt on Russian participation in 2015, and the denunciation would probably be more of a propaganda move. Russian media has reported that a military training ground in the country's Voronezh Oblast was attacked by 2 drones with explosives in the early hours, injuring 14 Russian soldiers. RIA Novosti, on the other hand, citing the governor of the region Alexander Gusev, claimed that no damage was caused as 1 drone was destroyed by air defense and another was deviated from its course by certain measures. The Commission on Geographical Name Standardization outside of Poland, which operates under the country's main geodetic service, has decided no longer to call the Russian city of Kaliningrad by its Russian name, but instead to use the Polish name wreckage. Of course, Russia responded to the move, calling it Warsaw's hostile actions. Examples of reaction are: the deputy chairman of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, proposed to call Poland the Duchy of Warsaw or the Kingdom of Poland as part of the Russian Federation as the successor to the Russian Empire instead. Polish Russophobes want to teach everyone history. They don't like the name Kaliningrad. They suggest writing Królewicz instead. Well, then no Krakow for them, only Krakow. No Gdansk, only Danzig. No Szczecin, only Stettin. Wrocław, only Breslau. Medvedev wrote on his English-language Twitter account. The Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov commented that Poland has been periodically sliding into a frenzy of hatred for Russians for centuries, and that it's not even Russophobia anymore, but a process bordering on insanity. The Russian publication Agentstvo reported that at the Victory Day parade in Moscow on May 9th, former NKVD and KGB officers who did not fight during World War II sat next to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Russia currently has 17 warships on combat duty in the Black Sea, 3 of which are missile carriers with a total salvo of up to 24 cruise missiles. The President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, has announced the call-up of reservists to military training camps. Belarusian media reported about the arrest of persons linked to the defense intelligence of Ukraine who were allegedly preparing for May 9th terrorist attacks in Belarus. A local TV channel reported that all detainees are under 30 years old. A US-produced explosive of a quantity enough to derail several trains has been seized. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. The Pentagon Press Secretary, Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder, has confirmed during a press briefing that Ukraine has used the Patriot system to intercept the Kinzhal missile. Ryder further updated the press that the United States continues training a couple thousand of Ukrainian soldiers at the training ground in Grafenwöhr, Germany. Yesterday, Arman Soldin, an AFP video reporter, was killed in Russia's missile attack on eastern Ukraine. AFP chairman Fabrice Fries noted that Soldin's death is a terrible reminder of the risks and dangers faced by journalists every day covering the conflict in Ukraine. The Biden administration has currently no intention of following Britain's lead in sending Ukraine long-range missiles, unnamed US officials stated. Some of those officials said the US hopes that the UK's planned delivery will silence those demanding Biden send long-range missiles to Ukraine. France has adopted a resolution calling on the EU to label the Wagner PMC a terrorist group, with Great Britain also planning to adopt a similar resolution. Japan is in talks to open a NATO liaison office, the first of its kind in Asia, as Russia's invasion of Ukraine has made the world less stable. The military object found in April in Poland could be a Russian Kh-55 cruise missile launched from Belarus during a mass attack against Ukraine, Polish radio station RMF-FM reported on May 10th. President of the Czech Republic, Petr Pavel, said in a radio interview with Czech Radio that his country will provide Ukraine with 2 Kyubi air defense systems and missiles, and that it would be appropriate for the Czech Republic to consider the possibility of transferring Czech L-159 combat aircraft to the armed forces of Ukraine. France has launched an investigation into potential war crimes and crimes against humanity following the death of Arman Soldin, a video journalist for the AFP, who was killed on May 9th in Donetsk Oblast. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. On May 9th, 2023, the makeup of Russia's annual Victory Day parade in Red Square highlighted the material and strategic communications challenges the military is facing 15 months into the war in Ukraine. Over 8,000 personnel reportedly took part in the parade, but the majority were auxiliary, paramilitary forces and cadets from military training establishments. The only personnel from deployable formations of regular forces were contingents of railway troops and military police. A vintage T-34 from a ceremonial unit was the sole tank on parade. Despite heavy losses in Ukraine, Russia could have fielded more armored vehicles. The authorities likely refrain from doing so because they want to avoid domestic criticism about prioritizing parades over combat operations. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. Russian President Vladimir Putin declined to use his Victory Day address to make any significant rhetorical changes and reiterated existing narratives, preparing for a protracted war and framing Russia as successfully resisting the entire West. Putin additionally attempted to use Victory Day celebrations to rally Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS, partners, many of which have sought to reduce their reliance on the Kremlin since February 2022. Wagner Group financier Yevgeny Prigozhin sees the Victory Day holiday as an opportunity to mock Putin and question his judgment. Prigozhin announced that Wagner forces will not withdraw from Bakhmut by his previously stated deadline of May 10th, despite the Russian Ministry of Defense (MOD) failing to provide Wagner with additional shells. Prigozhin's failure to follow through on his May 5th withdrawal threat indicates that he is cognizant of his dependence on the Russian MOD. Prigozhin continued to blame high casualties and the slow pace of advances in Bakhmut on other Russian irregular formations to frame Wagner as the only competent force operating in the area. Russian forces conducted another large-scale series of missile strikes against Ukraine on the night of May 8th to 9th. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The enemy continues to concentrate its main efforts on the Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka directions. During the day, the enemy carried out more than 30 attacks on the specified areas of the front. The fiercest battles continue for the cities of Bakhmut and Marinka. In the Liman direction, during the day, the enemy carried out unsuccessful offensive actions in the area of Serebryansk forest. In the Bakhmut direction, the enemy continues to advance. During the day, the enemy conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the city of Bakhmut. In the Avdiivka direction, the enemy conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the Avdiivka area. The enemy carried out airstrikes in the districts of Novokalinovo and Avdiivka. In the Marinka direction, units of the defense forces repelled numerous enemy attacks in the area of the city of Marinka. In the Shahtarsk direction, during the day, the enemy carried out offensive actions in the Novomikhailivka area without success. Mass dissatisfaction of local residents from the temporarily occupied Tokmak of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, whom the Russian occupation administration evacuated to Berdyansk, is noted. In particular, people complain that the Russians placed them in terrible living conditions, in rooms without windows, lighting, warm water and furniture. Also, the occupiers forbade the evacuated citizens to return to the city of Tokmak for an indefinite period. Russian occupation forces continue to suffer heavy losses on the battlefield. As a result, the enemy is equipping civilian educational institutions in the temporarily occupied territories as medical institutions. Thus, in Luhansk, the premises of 3 local hospitals have been fully equipped by the occupiers as military hospitals for the lightly and moderately injured. The Russian occupiers, under the pretext of evacuating civilians, continue to take away looted property from the frontline settlements of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Thus, in Enerhodar, servicemen of the Russian occupying forces completely looted all the city's medical institutions. All the city's medical equipment was taken to the temporarily occupied Simferopol of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. Also, all enterprises located in the industrial zone near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant were completely looted. And that wraps up today's report. Should you be interested in details, you can find links to every article I mention in the description as usual. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.